Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Snowpiercer. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So obviously, it's kind of entering wartime, and now, it all comes down to, the first blow, so that even being the first title, that being the title of this episode. So I thought that was really interesting. Battle of the Trains, really kind of getting into that this episode. I like the parallel tracks and kind of trying to get ahead of each other type of situation, slowing him down to kind of get the advantage and try to side by side it so that Josie could jump on board. Sadly, Wilford had his countermeasures, and that being a harpoon. And I love that whole thing of no, you're here as my confidant, Zara, but it's no, you're my hostage, because as long as I got you here, they would never do anything that would try to harm, they would never breach the engine because you would be in danger. So, and it's interesting too, because all the while this is happening, there's also that aspect of, hey, Audrey, sings and stuff like that. And I love that even Bess is sometimes when you sing, it almost makes me forget that you're a terrible human being. But also it's what also doesn't help is right, I know that everything you sing is a cover, so it's not even your words. But she's yeah, but it's not the lyrics that matter. It's the fact is I'm singing to someone. Who do you sing for, Bess? It's how is it that it's the end of the world and you have no one? She did have someone for a while, but her change in beliefs kind of blew that relationship up. But at the end of the day, she's yeah, I have Andre, I have I think she had Zara, and she's I've got Roach, and she's Roach? She's yeah, he was a mentor to me, and yeah, we battled each other, but despite everything, he had my back, so I'm hoping to be able to pull him out of the drawers. And she's I hope he is alive. And I'm the fact that you said it made me think he probably won't be. I'm kind of freaked out about it, because obviously that drawer situation is a toss up on whether or not someone will survive. We've that's been an issue in the past of not everyone comes out of the drawers okay. I think it's interesting. Yes, Wilford ended up sending his people, Kevin in particular, to go deal with any resistance on the train. Maybe he should have dealt with it himself. Maybe he would have. I don't know if he would have actually gotten results, because the problem is Wilford's not fighting one enemy. He is fighting a divided enemy on two different fronts. He's dealing with Audrey and them on Snowpiercer, but he's also dealing with his allies Ruth and Pike, who was a big boy, and the other dude ended up sacrificing himself because it's nah, Pike, you're the leader now, so you can't get caught. And I love he goes to Wiggins, which I'm Donnie! But it's oh yeah, the fact is, two things you need to know about us tailies. We have a long memory, Wiggins, and also we win wars. We won the last one, we're going to win this one. So it's do you want to essentially be on the right side of history, which I love. That's the theme of this too. It's yeah, because Oz is later on yeah, but what if Andre's no. LJ's there's no way Mr. Wilford's going to lose. It's but what if he does? Andre's not going to be too happy about the fact is that she's yeah, but we didn't really do anything. We're not doing the torturing. We just provided the venue. We kind of did nothing. But what Oz said, because it's just LJ was putting all her chickens in one all her eggs in one basket with Wilford, because it's just right, he's the man, everyone voted for him, everyone chose him last time, so there's no way. But also you're counting on people who've been kind of under his regime, even though it's they lived so long, not technically under his regime, it was under Melanie, the lie that Melanie continued. But then on top of that, you're oh, well, because once again, when it's all said and done, jumping ahead a little bit, you saw people celebrating. So I'm okay, so where's all that support Wilford had before? It's oh, now you got a little taste for a couple months of oh, this actually kind of sucks. Is this what we were actually all gung-ho about? Which is so interesting, because once again, there is no first, second, and third class. Once again, there's just the working class. So no one really had, there were some privileges, but mainly that went to, Wilford and those he deemed worthy of those privileges. So that was only a handful of people. So I guess everyone was just kind of when you're on the last arc, that is basically the humanity, like, allegiances flip like that, like on the dime, because it's like, oh, because it's always, what have you done for me lately? It's kind of what the mentality, I think, of a lot of people in the train are. Just kind of like, yeah, you did this for me in the past, but this person, and you kind of have done a crappy job recently, but this person's promising everything. Oh, you're letting me down? Well, this person's now promising, it's a little flip-floppy, so you always have to be on top of that type of stuff, so. But like I said, where's all that Wilfred, three-finger thing? Like, ooh, where's that? Oh, I didn't see a hint of that this episode. So, I guess no one's too happy under Wilfred's reign like they thought they would. But also, because of the whole Snowpiercer thing, it's also like, right, he is in a foul mood because, he got everything and then ended up, so maybe that's also the argument. Like, well, he'd be in a better mood if everything was okay. Things would have probably stayed the same if Andre hadn't done what he'd done, so I'm sure that's going to lose him some points towards some people being excited about his return. Once again, just for the sake of the show, they show a lot of support, but, that doesn't mean there aren't dissenters amongst them being like, oh, damn it, I hate Andre. Like, things were great under, Wilfred, but nevertheless. I did like the whole, like, both trains going dark situation, and it's like, right, who's who, and like, where's everyone? Luckily, Rufus say, like, right, this is bigger than us, Mr. Pike. Like, we need to let Mr. Layton know where we are, and basically activated, like, their New Year's celebration, and it showed them exactly where they were, and so they were able to get ahead. Sadly, Wilfred pushed Big Alice too much, and they didn't have the juice to keep going. Even though Javi kept telling, like, no, but, like, he was kind of, Wilfred was like, no, let's do it. Like, he kept getting pushed and pushed and pushed. Once again, he wasn't winning the war. Like, he wasn't winning the war on both fronts. He was kind of got the leg up on some fronts, but not others. I did like that aspect of, like, that, like, this is like a train yard maze, essentially. I like that, because it's like, right, we don't know what the other is. Wilfred's probably going to make a break for it, and if he gets out of this maze, he's going to have straight track for a long time. So we need it. If we're going to make our move, it needs to be now, because it's the only time we have the advantage. So I'm like, I don't know why, like, train battles like that is just like, it's like, oh, not something you thought you would, like, need and want, but it's just, like, so interesting to, like, oh yeah, like, just, like, I don't know, like, almost like, I had the high ground, Anakin. I don't know why. It just seems like it's such a dorky thing to me, like, to get so excited about train battles, but it's just so interesting to me, the maneuver, like, I mean, because it's like a game of chess, like, positioning and putting yourself in the right position, to take the piece that you need to take, It makes me think of that, and I don't know, I think that made that such a, just a tense scene first and foremost, because Snowpiercer had to drop 4 cars. Luckily, Sykes chose the right side. Was like, oh, she was literally, Astra survived 8 years out there, can't let her die on, like, day 2. So, hey, proving herself useful. I wonder, is it just because Sykes was hedging her bets, knowing that, like, right, like, everyone always doubts Andre. He always comes through in the end. Like, he won time and time again, even though it never seemed like it. Like, I guess you can make the argument the last fight ended a little, well, it was Wilford's, but also it kind of ended in a draw since Andre and them were able to get away. But, yeah, she hedged her bets on which side to choose. So, I mean, because you had Audrey calling her a traitor and stuff like that. But, I mean, I think, like a lot of people, she's probably just an opportunist. Like, cool. I'm going to take advantage of it. I'm going to prove myself useful to them. That way, I have my freedom, and I'm not kind of locked up and treated the same way you are, Audrey, as, like, this big threat. So, even though she's kind of been Wilfred's right hand for a while now. But I did like kind of Snowpiercer and Big Alice face-to-face. And it's just kind of like, yep, they've got no more power and stuff. And Andre's kind of like, yeah, so this is how it's going to be. Wilfred, you're going to surrender. And you're going to give us back give us, like, we're going to reconnect, and there's not going to be any bloodshed. And it's like, right, because you want Audrey back, right? So, and at one point, like, that thread of everything, wanting to be back with her again and everything. Wilford initially being like, no, I won't surrender. But he's like, all right, jackboot, stand down. Well, that's because his hands were forced, because Josie snuck aboard, and he's like, oh, don't worry, Zara's here, she won't do anything. And then Josie proceeds to smash the glass, and then Andre snuck up and beat the shit out of Wilford. There's a part of you like, I almost halfway expect you to keep going to the point that someone's going to, like, stop Andre, but it's like, well, you stabbed him in the hand, you, like, slammed him around a little bit, smacked him around a little bit, and it's like, cool, you know, made the jackboot stand down, and it's like, all right, say the line, and he's like, all right, Andre Layton has her turn, you're like, yeah. So, that ended up pretty well. Sadly, there were, they say the name and I always forget it, like, tall boy or big boy, like, that sucks, because obviously he wasn't going to, like, surrender his allies, like, he's willing to sacrifice himself, and Kevin was like, oh, you don't need that tongue, so I was like, you're not going to be able to just, like, aim for his tongue, you're going to end up, and sadly, he ended up dying in the process. And I love that LJ, once again, being the, you gotta appreciate her tenacity for being the opportunist that she is, and she's like, cool, like, time to get on the right side of history. And she's like, Oz, I love you so much. And then she proceeds to kill Kevin, and she's like, the resistance and stuff like that. You're like, what? Okay, because when she was, like, trying to hand home dude, like, some food, I'm like, how's that gonna help? How's that supposed to... Oh, cool. You killed Kevin. It's like, yeah, he did that. And it's like, yeah, I did. Andre, guess what? He killed one of your friends. I killed him. Aren't I awesome? And just like, you know, that's kind of the problem Oz has with LJ sometimes. It's like you're always scheming. You're plotting. You know, you and your machinations. And once again, you just have to admire... It's just like, God, you have no allegiances but to yourself. Like, whatever's going to put you in the best position. Once again, the argument is quite a few people on the train who are like that, but I love that. And just being like, oh yeah, I was with the Resistance the entire time. It's just like, your timing's interesting. Like, oh, let me kill Kevin now that we know that Andre won. You know, it's like, if you had stepped up beforehand, you know, could have avoided a fatality in all of this, but, you know, she's going to spin this however she's going to spin it, so that's definitely going to be interesting. Obviously, Andre and Zara being reunited, and you see Josie coming in, you're just like, oh, this is a bit awkward. Because it's like, well, what do you do? Like, he made his promise to Zara and to the baby, but there is still the thing of, at the end of the day, it's like, Andre and Josie still had their history. There was something between them for a bit after Zara abandoned them in the tail, so it's like, I don't know, man, like, a lot of that got rekindled being alone on Snowpiercer, but that's still probably going to, like, rear its head eventually, probably potentially lead to some issues, so I did like that line about, like, oh yeah, Wilford getting locked up, and then also being like, oh, and Josie's, like, taking care of his hand and stuff, and it's like, oh, the monster come back to, you know, take on his creator, and she's like, yeah, it's very poetic, isn't it? But he's saying, like, yeah, that train won't continue to be Andre's. He will let them down, and they will come back to me, because I am the train. Once again, that he can't delineate between the two, that to him, it is that. Like, you know, it's like, I am the train, even though, like, there are other... Because for him, it's like, I built the engine, I did all this, like, you know, even though it's like, there were other pieces to it. But it's like, no, I'm the king, I'm the god, blah, 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 blah. You know? Because I think it's interesting, because even Asha was like, oh, you're going up against the great Mr. Wilford, like, just the 8 of you. And it's like, oh, but, you know, he's not the great person you think he is. And it's like, right, I've got a baby on board, which Asha was like, there are things you'll do for a child that you will regret, you know? So I think she talks about, like, maybe that's in reference to other people she witnessed do that, or she referenced she had, like, a nephew, so maybe stuff she did for him. But that thing about Asha, I think, is so interesting. When, like, she wanted the lights out, then she also put her helmet on. And, like, so I don't know whether that's her defense mechanism from, like, blocking out the world. That way she's able to block out, like, all the noise. Like, maybe she hears the voices of everyone she's lost. And it's just, like, maybe the dark is her way to kind of hide herself away from being surrounded by all the dead bodies of everyone that died around her. I don't know. I still just get the inkling, like, there's way more that Asha isn't telling them, you know? I don't know she told them the truth, what she experienced and what she went through might have been the after effect of like, oh, this might have been the long run. That may be where we ended up and what we went through eventually. Maybe, but maybe there was a story from before that she isn't telling. Because I was wondering about, like, okay, so how is it that she is, because I was like, oh, maybe I misinterpreted things from the trailer. It's like, no, the lie is where we get, where I got the misconception of, oh, I'm from New Eden. It's because Andre needed to tell a lie to the train. Because it's like, right, he talks to Ruth, which I love them being reunited. I'm like, ah! And she's like, oh, you want a drink to celebrate? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, I knew you'd handle it, Ruth. And they're hugging him. I'm like, yeah. Never in a million years would you ever think you get that. You never would have, like, you look at first episode, like, you look at the beginning of the series, you'd be like, no way in hell those two are ever going to hug like that. And to see that moment, I don't know, it just reunited after everything, after this long fought battle, but Andre's like, right, we're going to show that democracy wins, so we're going to put it up to a vote. And she's like, are you sure about that? And he's like, because going to where they're going will be a treacherous track, because there was a war at the time, so it's like, yeah, that track is really messed up, and so it's fraught with danger. But Andre's like, no, we'll take it to a vote. And she's like, are you prepared for people to say no? And I'm like, Andre believes wholeheartedly that this is the right move to make, but I'm like, how are you so sure people aren't going to say no? And it's like, because he concocted a lie. And even, like, I love Alex being like, what is he doing? And Ben's like, he's bullshitting. He's spinning the tale that Asha is like, oh, we found her out there. She's a survivor. Everyone needs a great story, you know? I mean, to be fair, is it any different from Wilford? Like, he boasts, you know, he exaggerated, but also, like, what he tells is a little closer to the truth. But he did go through a lot to silence any potential stuff with Melanie, because he didn't want to take the chance. He knew there was a possibility that there was some glimmer of hope, and if they're off the train, if they're off Snowpiercer, he's God to them, because he's the great Mr. Wilford who saved the last of humanity. So it's like, if we leave the train, this has been the same conversation since last season, like, leave the train, it loses all its power, like, you know, because leaving the train would mean leaving him, as he just delineated that, hey, I am the train. So if this arc is no longer needed because there's somewhere that is habitable, isn't that going to be an issue? So, but that's also the thing too. Now Andre's putting all his ducks in one basket. He had that vision. He has that belief. Because even Ben's like, yeah, based on Melanie's data, this seems like the best shot. But you're putting it all on the line. This big lie. And it's like, will it pay off in the end? Who knows? Because if you fail, it will bite you super, super hard. Because you are going to, like, people are going to side with Wilford. Flip-floppy people are like, oh, people are going to rise up against you because you basically set them on the path. You concocted this lie, so you better hope it works out. But that's why I'm like, I feel like Asha, once again, knows more than she's letting on. Or maybe she's just willing to go along with this lie. But there's just something there, something about that I'm curious to see where that kind of goes. The thing is, you're also going to have to keep her away from other people, because people are going to be like, oh, so what's New Eden like? You concocted this lie, so you need to, like, you're going to probably try and limit as many interactions between people as possible, because there are going to be people asking questions, they will eventually start poking holes in her story. So, especially because there are certain people who know the truth, like Audrey knows. Well, she's locked up in third; she's confined to third. So we'll see what life is like for her back there. Is she going to still kind of rise up and still be Queen Bee, or now that Wilford's lost, like, will she kind of lose some of her luster? I don't think there's any going back to who she was before. I think she's stuck as this version of Audrey yet again. Like, she went through a lot to change herself, not to be that person again, and sadly she is. So I don't know if there's any reversing that. So she's gonna probably do whatever she can to get to Wilford. So we shall see. But yeah, this lie, and yet the lie does work their way. The votes are 2-1 for yes. So you even have Bess being like, yeah, what's one more lie? And then Andre's like, yeah, this will be the last lie. But then Ruth is like, I doubt it, because she's like, it's almost like the train demands a lie from, oh, a magical engineer in the engine, or Melanie's perfect data, or a survivor we found. So it's like, right, they are the council. They are the ones on board. It's like, all right, so what do we do? And everyone's kind of on board with the lie. And Josie's like, yep, we just better hope it pulls through. And because Andre saw his vision, because Bess is also one of the ones, she knows the truth about Andre. She knows, like, he's hedging all his bets because of a vision he had. So I'm curious. She didn't say anything in this episode. Doesn't mean she won't be like, so yeah, remember, like, that vision or anything wasn't any reason why you did all this. He was like, no, what are you talking about, Bess? Like you said, that was just part. I was near death and stuff. Or he might try to be like, Bess, I know you think I'm crazy, but there's something to this. We'll see. So, especially because they did kind of lean into, like, oh, the lush green of it all. Because that's also the thing too. When Asha saw that plant, like, last episode, she kind of, like, ripped up the soil, so it just seemed like someone who, like, probably hadn't seen greenery for a while probably wouldn't act like that. So that's why I'm like, maybe she is from this technical New Eden, and she is just hiding that fact because she doesn't want to go back, but she owes Andre because it's like, right, you saved my life, so if you need me to do something, I'll do it. But there's just definitely something she's hiding. I'm just not sure what. Obviously, circling back to the Roach situation, turns out he's okay, his daughter's okay, his wife sadly isn't. And it's just like, oh God, you're going to have to wake him up and tell him that his wife isn't okay. Which is going to be the heartbreaking thing. Like, their daughter's going to have to wake up without her mom, and it's just, well, that sucks. Like, you were hoping that everything was going to be okay, but it came with a caveat. So, Roach isn't going to be okay. I mean, his wife is the one that was kind of more so like, oh, you need to choose Wilford's side. And still ended up this way. So what Roach is going to be like when he finally comes to in the aftermath of that, plus finding out I mean, because she's also going to have to lie to him. It's like, yeah, you are like the closest thing I have to a friend. And I think a lot of what Audrey said, that might actually lead to Bess turning to Audrey, like, it's like, yeah, I'm gonna visit you in third, because despite everything, you're the only person, like, because she has this big lie on her shoulders. I mean, there was a lot on her shoulders last season, being, like, the train detective and everything. That kind of fell on her shoulders to figure things out, and she felt like she was failing in some regard. So now it's like, right, she can't help her friend. Like, I think things are going to turn sideways, and the only person she really is going to have potentially is going to be Audrey. So that they find some kinship, because it's like, right, at the end of the day, you might have Wilford, but he's locked away, and so, like, other than that, you have no one on the train. And even Bess will be like, technically, I have no one on the train, because everyone else has someone else. And even the people I'm claiming to be friends and close to and stuff like that, maybe those relationships falter and change a little bit just because of the lie she has to keep, because she is going to be lying to Roche the entire time. So that's going to be the thing. Or do you bring him into the fold of, like, yeah, like, the less people know about the lie, the better. So we'll see how it all works out, see how this all plays out. It's definitely going to be interesting to see where all this ultimately ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.